We've had too many of these press conferences. We've had too many of these gatherings for these families that are struggling, that are devastated, that are completely in the dark about what is going on with their loved ones who have now been held hostage for 6 months without any wellness checks, without any proof of life, without any of the requirements for prisoners of war or hostages by international law. And there's plenty of attention, and there should be, on the humanitarian issues and concerns that are going on in Gaza, and to what extent Israel is playing a role. But it is beyond me why there is so little attention put on Hamas to release illegally captured, tortured, potentially raped hostages who are innocent civilians. If there's going to be a ceasefire of some sort, a stop, a pause, whatever you want to call it, to allow for the hostages to be released, then we need two parties to agree. Yes, of course, Israel has to agree, but so does Hamas. And we cannot continue to have these meetings, these gatherings, continue to ask these families who are suffering so much to stand up again and again just to remind this country and the world that their loved ones remain in captivity, held by a terrorist organization. And you tell me one other time in our history that Americans have been held hostage by a terrorist group and nobody pays attention. Nobody seems to care. And yes, I certainly hear far more from folks advocating for a permanent ceasefire. And every time someone comes up to me and says, why don't you demand a permanent ceasefire? I ask them, well, what should happen to the hostages? Now, they all say, well, of course the hostages should be released. Israel does not control the hostages. Israel cannot release the hostages. So it is long past time that every single country in the world, in the UN, in the EU, in the Arab League, every single country needs to be calling out Hamas to release the hostages. I am tired of the ICRC saying that there's only a political solution here. The ICRC's job is to make sure that prisoners of war, that captives are healthy according to international humanitarian law. Their job is not to negotiate a political release. And yet we have British government officials threatening to withhold aid to Israel if Israel does not allow the ICRC in to check on the arrested Hamas terrorists. Yet there's no call for the ICRC to check on these families' loved ones. It is long past time that the world rises up, led by the United States, and demands that Hamas release the hostages right now. And if there are countries that have connections to Hamas, then we need to ratchet up the pressure on those countries to put pressure on Hamas to do the right and just thing, to do the thing that international law requires. This war would end today if Hamas released the hostages and surrendered their arms. It would be over today because a terrorist group attacked Israel and innocent civilians during a previous permanent ceasefire, brutally, horrifically killed many, tortured others, raped others. That's why this started. And Hamas can end it today. And so I am here sick and tired of having to see these people who have become, unfortunately, and I say that not because I don't love them, I do, but unfortunately my friends now, having to stand up and plead for somebody to pay attention to the fact that their loved ones, American citizens, are being held hostage in brutal conditions by a terrorist organization. And it is time that the United States and every other country around the world stands up to terrorism, stands up for democracy, and demands that our loved ones are returned today.